The evening lights of Manhattan shimmered through the tall glass windows of La Belle Maison, one of the city's most elegant restaurants. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished tables, the hum of polite laughter blending with the gentle clinking of silverware. Waiters moved in perfect rhythm, quiet, graceful, almost invisible in their precision. Among them was Marcus Reed, a 32-year-old waiter whose calm presence had become part of the restaurant's quiet heartbeat. Marcus wasn't the type to be noticed. His uniform was immaculate, his posture upright, and his movements practiced. But what stood out most was the serenity he carried with him. While others traded jokes in the back room or sighed under the pressure of demanding guests, Marcus simply worked, focused, respectful, unbothered by chaos. His eyes were warm, but his silence spoke volumes. He had worked at La Belle Maison for 5 years, long enough to know every regular's order, every chef's temper, and every unspoken expectation. But that night, a new guest caught his attention, an older man, perhaps in his late 60s, who entered alone. The host greeted him, but the man didn't respond. He simply handed over a small card that read, "I am deaf. Please be patient. Thank you." The host nodded awkwardly, murmuring something Marcus couldn't hear as he led the man to a table by the window. When Marcus glanced over, he noticed the man's face, dignified yet tired, his expression distant, almost lost in thought. His white hair was neatly combed, his hands resting in front of him with a stillness that seemed heavy. Marcus volunteered to take the table. "Table 9, Mr. Gray," the host whispered, relieved to hand off what he thought might be a difficult guest. Marcus nodded, slipping quietly toward the table. He approached with a soft smile, pen and notepad ready, but instead of speaking, he gently tapped his chest twice, a simple sign of greeting. The man's head lifted immediately. His cloudy eyes met Marcus's, and for a brief moment there was surprise, then recognition. Marcus raised his hands again, this time signing fluently. "Good evening, sir. My name is Marcus. I'll be your waiter tonight." The man's entire demeanor changed. His lips parted into a faint smile, the first hint of ease since he'd entered. He signed back slowly, "Thank you. It's been years since someone spoke to me like this." Marcus's own smile deepened, and for a few quiet moments, they conversed entirely through movement, hands shaping words, expressions carrying tone, silence speaking louder than any sound. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with conversation, but within that little space by the window, there was peace. Mr. Gray ordered simply grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, and a glass of water with lemon. Marcus nodded, understanding perfectly, and walked back to the kitchen. But as the evening unfolded, Marcus noticed things others didn't. Mr. Gray's hands trembled slightly when he lifted his fork. He seemed distracted, his eyes darting toward the window as if looking for someone. He carried an air of sadness that Marcus recognized too well, the kind that comes from a lifetime of being unheard. Halfway through the meal, the restaurant grew louder. A large corporate group had taken the central tables, laughter booming, chairs scraping. The elegant harmony of La Belle Maison began to fracture under the weight of noise. And amidst that noise, Mr. Gray began to choke. It happened quietly, a sudden stiffening, his hand clutching his throat, the water glass tipping over. No one noticed at first. Laughter masked the faint sound of the glass shattering. But Marcus, ever watchful, was already moving. He dropped his tray, rushing across the room, his voice sharp for the first time that night. "Move." The crowd turned, startled. Marcus reached Mr. Gray within seconds, wrapping his arms around the man's chest. He positioned himself carefully, one quick thrust, then another. The lodged piece of fish flew from a man's throat, clattering onto the table. The old man gasped for air, trembling, eyes wide. The room went silent. Marcus steadied him, one hand on his shoulder, lowering him gently back into the chair. "You're okay, sir," he said softly. Then, realizing sound was meaningless to him, he began to sign. "You're safe. Breathe slowly. You're all right now." Mr. Gray's breathing steadied. His trembling hand rose to sign back. "You saved my life." Marcus shook his head, modestly. Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't true. The truth was, no one else had seen him. In a room full of people, a deaf man's silent distress had gone unnoticed, except by the quietest person there. The manager hurried over, face pale. "Marcus, is everything all right?" "It's under control," Marcus said gently, cleaning the spilled water, making sure Mr. Gray's dignity remained intact. "He just needs a moment." The other guests resumed talking, awkwardly at first, then louder, eager to forget the disruption. But Marcus stayed beside the older man until his breathing was calm again. When Mr. Gray finally stood to leave, he signed one last thing. "How do you know sign language?" Marcus hesitated before answering, his movements slower now. "My mother was deaf," he signed. "She taught me. It was our language, our way to talk when the world was too loud." Mr. Gray's eyes softened. His lips moved as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, he placed his hand over Marcus's, a gesture of gratitude so pure it needed no translation. He scribbled something on a small notepad, tore the page, and handed it over before leaving. The note simply read, "You have a kind soul. Thank you." When the man was gone, Marcus stood by the window, watching as he disappeared into the night, a lone figure swallowed by the city's glow. Something about him lingered, though. There was a quiet dignity, a weight in his eyes that Marcus couldn't forget. He tucked the note into his vest pocket, unaware that the man he had just saved was Theodore Gray, father of Adrian Gray, one of the most powerful tech billionaires in the world. As the restaurant returned to its rhythm, Marcus cleaned the table in silence. He looked down at his hands, hands that had once signed lullabies to his mother, hands that now carried a stranger's gratitude. He smiled faintly, whispering under his breath, "Mom, I hope you saw that." The sound was swallowed by the clatter of dishes and murmurs of conversation, but in Marcus's heart there was peace. He didn't know that his simple act of kindness, born from years of silent compassion, would soon echo beyond anything he could imagine. That night, as he walked home through the chill of the city streets, he replayed the moment over and over, the panic, the calm, the hands that spoke across silence. To Marcus, it wasn't heroism. It was humanity, the only language he truly knew. The next morning began like any other, gray skies, the faint hum of traffic, and the smell of rain lingering in the air. Marcus Reed buttoned his crisp white shirt, smoothed his apron, and prepared for another day at La Belle Maison. But when he turned the corner onto West 57th, he froze. The restaurant was surrounded by media vans, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Reporters stood outside, microphones in hand, speaking animatedly into cameras. The usual calm of the early morning rush had been replaced by flashing lights and muffled voices. Marcus blinked in confusion. He checked his watch, 8:03 a.m., far earlier than the restaurant usually attracted attention. He ducked his head and slipped through the side entrance, hoping to avoid the commotion. Inside, the staff buzzed with nervous excitement. The manager, Mr. Patel, was pacing by the host's stand, his phone glued to his ear. When he saw Marcus, his face lit up in relief and disbelief. "Marcus, thank God you're here," Patel exclaimed, lowering his phone. "Do you have any idea what's going on?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, sir. Did something happen?" Patel took a breath, as if he still couldn't quite believe the words himself. "The man you saved last night, that was Theodore Gray." The name hung in the air like electricity. "Theodore Gray?" Marcus repeated, the syllables unfamiliar, yet oddly powerful. "Yes," Patel said, nodding vigorously. "Father of Adrian Gray, the billionaire who owns Gray Tech, the tech genius everyone talks about. He's here, Marcus, in our restaurant." Marcus blinked, the words not quite sinking in. He remembered the old man's kind eyes, the tremor in his hands, the quiet way he'd signed "thank you." He hadn't seen wealth or power, just humanity. Before he could respond, the restaurant door opened, and in walked Adrian Gray himself. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his presence seemed to pull the room into focus. Cameras flashed outside the glass as he entered, flanked by two assistants and a cluster of reporters held at bay by security. Adrian's expression was composed but heavy with emotion. He scanned the restaurant until his eyes found Marcus, standing quietly near the bar, unsure of what to do with his hands. He walked straight toward him. "You're Marcus Reed?" Adrian asked, his voice calm yet weighted with gratitude. "Yes, sir," Marcus said softly, straightening his posture. "That's me." Adrian reached out his hand, grasping Marcus's firmly. "You saved my father's life," he said, "and you did it when no one else even noticed. Thank you." Marcus shook his head, modestly. "Anyone would have—" "No," Adrian interrupted gently. "Anyone should have. But you did." For a moment, silence filled the restaurant. The staff watched from a respectful distance, caught between awe and disbelief. Adrian gestured toward the private dining room. "Can we talk in private?" Marcus nodded and followed him inside. The door closed, muting the noise of reporters and curious whispers. Inside, Theodore Gray sat by the window, looking healthier but still fragile. His eyes brightened when he saw Marcus. Theodore signed immediately, "You came—" Marcus smiled, responding fluently, "Of course. How are you feeling today?" Adrian watched, mesmerized. "You know sign language," he murmured, almost to himself. Marcus nodded. "My mother was deaf. She passed away when I was 19. I learned so we could talk. It was our connection." Theodore signed something again, and Adrian looked between them helplessly. What did he say? Marcus translated softly. "He said he's proud of me, and that your mother would be proud of you too." Adrian swallowed hard, emotion tightening his jaw. He placed a hand on his father's shoulder before turning back to Marcus. "He doesn't speak much since my mother died," Adrian said quietly. "But he told me this morning that he felt peace for the first time in years, because someone heard him without needing sound." Marcus's throat tightened. He looked down, his hands clasped together. "Your father's a good man," he said simply. "He just needed someone to listen in the way he speaks." Adrian nodded slowly. "Marcus, I run a company built on communication, Gray Tech. Billions of people use our software to connect, but I've never stopped to think about the people who can't." He paused. "Until now." He sat forward, his eyes focused and sincere. "I want to change that, and I want you to help me." Marcus blinked, taken aback. "Me, sir?" "Yes, you," Adrian said. "We've been developing a project, an AI-based accessibility system that translates real-time sign language into speech and text. It's still experimental, and honestly, we've been missing the human understanding behind it. Someone who doesn't just know the signs, but feels what they mean. I think you're that person." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. He had lived his entire adult life behind other people's tables, serving quietly unseen. The idea of stepping into a world of innovation, technology, and purpose felt like stepping into light after years in the shadows. "I'm not an engineer," he said hesitantly. "I don't know anything about tech." Adrian smiled. "You don't need to. You know communication. You know empathy. We can teach technology. We can't teach that." Mr. Gray watched the exchange with a gentle smile, signing softly to Marcus. "You gave me a voice again. Help give others one too." Marcus's eyes stung with tears he hadn't realized he'd been holding back. He nodded slowly, then looked at Adrian. "If I can help even one more person be understood the way my mother deserved to be, then yes, I'll do it." Adrian extended his hand again, this time not as a billionaire, but as a man humbled by gratitude. "Welcome to Gray Tech, Marcus." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Marcus's story spread like wildfire across news channels and social media, the waiter who saved a billionaire's father, but Marcus never sought the spotlight. When journalists asked for interviews, he spoke not of fame or fortune, but of listening to silence and seeing humanity beyond noise. At Gray Tech headquarters, Marcus became the heart of the company's new accessibility initiative, working with teams of engineers, linguists, and developers. He taught them how sign language wasn't just movement, it was emotion, rhythm, and soul. He often visited Theodore, who joined him during testing sessions, smiling proudly as he watched his rescuer bridge the gap between two worlds. The old man's eyes gleamed with life again. the quiet gratitude of someone who had found his voice in another's hands. One afternoon, during a presentation at Graytech's annual conference, Adrian stood beside Marcus on stage. The massive screen behind them displayed the company's latest creation, a sleek device that could translate sign language into spoken words instantly. Adrian addressed the audience. This project began not with technology, he said, but with compassion. One man reminded us that silence is not emptiness, it's another way of speaking. Then, turning to Marcus, he signed slowly, a little clumsy but heartfelt. "Thank you." The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears. Marcus smiled, responding with steady hands. "You're welcome. Now the world can listen too." Months later, as Marcus walked home one quiet evening, he paused at a small park bench near the Hudson River. The city glowed behind him, lights shimmering like distant stars. He took out the old note Theodore had given him that night in the restaurant. "You have a kind soul. Thank you." He folded it carefully, slipped it back into his pocket, and whispered to the night, "Mom, I kept listening." A soft breeze rustled through the trees, almost like a reply, and in that moment, Marcus understood what his life had become. Not a tale of rescue, but of connection. His hands, once used to serve in silence, now helped millions find their own voices. Because sometimes the world doesn't change through the loudest speeches or the grandest actions. Sometimes it changes through hands that speak and hearts that truly listen.